Hello once again YouTube, this is me, Base Chillern, and we are back again with another in-depth manga collection tour, and we have moved on to the first full shelf, and we clearly have a lot to go through, so let's just get right on into it. So the first manga that we have here is 5 centimeters per second, which is the manga adaptation of the Makoto Shinkai film. This was my first Makoto Shinkai manga, and I personally really like it. It adds, like, a little more to the story than what the original movie did. It doesn't add a significant amount, but it adds enough to make it worth buying. Then after that we have Seventh Garden, volumes 1 through 7. This is one of those exceptions where I'm not a very big fan of battle shonen, but Seventh Garden is kind of a battle shonen. And it's about this, gardener who works for this really rich family, or this well-off family, and one day while he's working, he runs across this girl who calls herself a demon, and she enlists his help to help her get revenge on these angels that trapped her. There's a lot of context that I can't go into because it's spoiler territory, so it's hard for me to summarize this story without actually spoiling it. Because, with each volume, a different sort of, mystery about what's really going on is introduced, and you're slowly, led on to what's actually going on throughout the entire series. So there's not really much I can say without spoiling the series, but it's really, really good. And maybe I like it because of all the hot girls. Maybe. That might be it. I like the main girl and her titties. Next up we have 7 Billion Needles, volumes 1 through 4, which is complete. This is a really old release by Vertical, you can tell, because the logo used to look, it was just a V. Down there it says Vertical. And this is a series about this girl, and she's living with, her extended family. And she's just this really quiet girl who doesn't talk to anybody, and she always has her headphones on, and she's just very antisocial, and she winds up getting, getting intertwined in this battle between these two sort of godly entities that have been fighting each other throughout time and space since the beginning of time. And it's kind of like a coming of age story / sci-fi, and it's really, really good. It's a little out of print, not incredibly out of print, but it's slowly becoming harder and harder to find. So if you are interested, I suggest picking it up now before it is too late. Next up we have A Centaurs Life, volumes 1 through 13. I always go into such depth about Centaurs Life because on the surface is this cute little, slice of life about, cute, animal girls. But it's, a universe that is, very, 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 detailed. The author will go out of their way to expand upon this universe to such a degree that it seems very unnecessary. There are little essays in between each chapter that tell you about the world. There's very, very long essays at the very back of the book that tell you about the history of the town that these girls live in. And interspersed between this cute little everyday slice of life between these these centaurs and these unicorn girls and demon girls and stuff like that, you get the actual political intrigue and wars going on during the time with different races and giant government cover-ups. It's just it's a very confusing series where it feels like it's supposed to be this really cutesy slice of life, but then the next chapter somebody will get killed by an alien on in a war zone. It's just very, very wild, and it's kind of a niche thing, but if that sounds like something that you'd really get into, definitely pick up A Centaur's Life. It's pretty good. Next up we have A Silent Voice, volumes 1 through 7, which is complete. This is a very, very, pretty much an instant classic that, regardless of your tastes, it's definitely something you should have in your collection. It is kind of a coming-of-age story about people with disabilities and bullying, and the long-term consequences of that sort of thing. It's just a really beautiful story, and if you haven't read it already, shame on you, but definitely look into it, definitely pick it up, because it is a beautiful story, and it will move you in some form or fashion, regardless of your tastes. Next up we have Akka 13, which is volume 1. I read it, and it's sort of like a slice of life slash like sort of like intrigue, mystery sort of thing. I don't think I'm that deep enough into it to figure out what's really going on in Akka, but it feels like it's getting to something. Maybe in volume 2 I'll be a little more, I'll be able to actually like pinpoint what Akka is actually about, because right now it's just about like the daily comings and goings of this like government agency and stuff like that. Next up we have After Hours Volume 1. I am happy to announce that After Hours Volume 2 is coming out in like June. So like our year-long wait for Volume 2 is almost over. This was like the first Yuri that Viz had published, to my knowledge, and it was super hype. And it's about these two older girls. I think one of them's in her mid like 20s and the other one's in her 30s, and it's really, really refreshing, especially if you're tired of all the nonsense Yuri that always takes place in high school. Like, not everyone's being gay in high school. Some people are being gay as adults, like in After Hours. So yeah. Now we have Again, Volume 1, which is a brand new pickup for me, about a guy who, after graduating from high school, winds up in an accident and gets to live his high school life again. It's by the creator of Yuri on Ice, and it looks like it's building up to be a pretty good story, and I can't wait for more of this. Next up we have Aho Girl, A Clueless Girl, Volumes 1 and 2, and then on the second shelf we have Volumes 3 through 5. It's just a dumb 4-coma comedy about this really stupid girl. I mean, that's pretty much all there is to it, and not a lot of people like it, but I personally do because I like the author's comedic styling, because I read another manga of his a long, long time ago called Dojin Work, and I really, really liked it, and I really liked the anime adaptation, and Aho Girl just kind of piques my dumb comedy fancy just right. So I mean, I find myself attached to it. Next up we have Ajin, Volumes 1 through 10. This is really, really good. I really like it. But it comes out so slowly. Whenever like a new volume comes out, I feel like I have to like pull out the last 4 volumes just for context, because I have a really terrible memory. Oh, I just hit my light. But yeah, Ajin is a really great manga, and about immoral people and ghosts, because I'm really bad at summarizing. But yeah, that's Ajin, Volumes 1 through 10. Then we have Akuma no Riddle, Volumes 1 through 5, which is complete. This is kind of like a Battle Yuri, where the ending is actually like really rushed, and it was a huge cop-out. The end was this massive cop-out, because like you have like throughout the entire series you have like people like apparently dying, like they're getting killed in like this like game where they're trying to kill this one girl, and if they kill this one girl they will get whatever they desire, but they keep getting killed by other people. But at the very end of the fucking series you figure out that nobody actually died, and it's just so cleanly swept under the rug, and it's all like, God damn it, Akuma no Riddle, I was rooting for you. Next up we have Alice in Zeroku, Volumes 1 through 3. This is kind of on the chopping block. I don't know if I'm going to keep this series or not, but it's essentially about this little girl, and she's kind of like this, like, she's like from a lab where they like experimented on her because she has like powers where she can summon things with her mind, and she meets this really old crotchety guy who like runs a flower shop, and it's just kind of them learning to live with each other, and her kind of like living in the real world after having grown up in like this lab for most of her life. Next we have Alice on Deadlines, Volumes 1 through 4, which is complete, and this is kind of just your standard dumb fan service manga. There's really nothing special about it, and I'm sorry I'm shaking the camera so much, but the reason it's really special to me is just I've had it for so long, and I bought it during a time where I was like, it was like a point in high school where I was really starting to like come to grips with my sexuality, and maybe girls are hot. And so I exclusively bought only manga that was extremely fan-servicey, and this was one of the survivors, because I sold a lot of like the fan-servicey schlock I bought during that time. But it's just a really dear manga to me, even though it's just a dumb fan-service comedy, but it's really, really old. And you can tell it's old because it's a Yen Press title, right? And you can tell a Yen Press title is old because of the price. And the price for this, let me just find it, was $10.99. A regular price for a volume of manga. But not for Yen Press. But yeah, you can tell a Yen Press book is old when they're going for like a regular fucking price. And I kind of want to make a video about Alice on Deadlines because it's actually like secretly really bad. Like, it's good to me on like a personal level because I bought it, you know, like I said, during a time where I was starting to realize that I really liked girls. But there's a lot of themes in here that are questionable. Like I'm just going to say right now that there's a lot of, like, trans-misogynistic sort of stuff that goes on in Alice on Deadlines throughout the entire manga. And I'm just going to leave that hanging right there for y'all. Next up we have All You Need Is Kill, which is a single volume. I remember I bought this because my husband really wanted it, but it's a really good manga. If you've either read the novel, which I know also got an English release, or if you've seen, the Tom Cruise movie, Edge of Tomorrow, which is is based off the novel that this is also based off of. And the art is by the very beloved Takeshi Obata from Death Note fame. And it is a pretty neat action sort of sci-fi about this guy caught in a time loop in a war against aliens. Pretty good stuff. Next up we have The Ancient Magus's Bride, volumes 1 through 8. Another series that I definitely recommend anybody, regardless of their tastes, have in their collection, unless, you know, the base theme of girl sells herself into slavery and is bought by, like, some immortal bone monster. Kind of... I realize maybe it's not for everyone now that I summarized it. But I think it's a really, really nice manga. It blends fantasy elements with slice of life elements with adventure elements really, really neatly. And it has a very interesting and detailed fantastical world, and it just kind of like keeps you on the edge of your seat while also being very calming in some places. And I also have, I think this came with volume 6 or 7. It's the little like miniature booklet, which I really wish a lot more manga came with extras like this. It's just a quick little story snippet that they could have easily just put into the book itself, but they have as like a little extra. But yeah, like I said, I'd really like to see a lot more manga with like fun little extras like that. That's really neat. That gives you like some more incentive to buy it. If there's like, hey, there's an exclusive little extra and you gotta buy this whole book in order to get this cute little extra thing. And yeah, that's Ancient Magus's Bride. Then we have Anonymous Noise, volumes 1 through 5, and down here we have volume 6. This is a manga that I almost dropped a really long time ago when it first started coming out. But I think what is keeping me around is, one, it's the band element. Like, I really like any kind of story that has like a musical sort of band story going along with it. But also it's because Shoujo Beat stuff goes for like $10, which is like $7 on Amazon. And if it's one thing I like, it's cheap manga. And all other like shoujo manga that are just kind of like okay, but are at a higher price point, are more likely to get dropped. But Anonymous Noise is staying strong because it's cheap for me to continue to collect, and also the band element. Before we continue, we have Assassination Classroom, volumes 1 through 20. We were one volume away from this being complete, and I love Yusei Matsui for his early work, which I cannot shut up about, and you will never get me to shut up about it ever, which is Majin Tante Naogami Nero, which is a mystery manga about a demon who eats mysteries, and like the high school girl that he kind of like keeps captive as his cover to make sure that no one finds out that he's a demon. And it's really, really good. And Assassination Classroom is also really, really good. I kind of stopped reading it around like volume 9 or 10, so what I'm planning on doing is when volume 21 comes out, I'm just going to binge the whole series and cry. But yeah, this series, I love it, but it's also like my one little strand of hope that maybe one day Viz will publish Majin Tante Naoga Minero, but it's slowly becoming older and older, and my hopes are getting smaller and smaller, which is really, really unfortunate, because it's probably my favorite Shonen Jump manga. Like, no lies. And I have very few Shonen Jump manga that I like. Next up we have another, which is an all-in-one. I'm totally okay with omnibuses. Like, omnibuses are chill. I like them. But sometimes I feel like you crammed a little too much in here, because this is a 4-in-1, which 3-in-1s, 2-in-1s, totally okay, totally acceptable. 3-in-1s, fine. 3-in-1s are cool. 3-in-1s, neat. 4-in-1s, you might want to trim down the size, because at that point it becomes really difficult to read. The only saving grace for another is that they have it in their, like, oversized edition, which makes it a little easier. But if it was like their regular size edition, it would be impossible to read. It would be impossible to open without damaging it constantly. But another is kind of like this psychological mystery thriller, and it's really, really neat, and I really, really like it, despite the fact that it's almost impossible to read because of the size. Next up we have Bao, Volume 1. This is a really old manga by Hirohiko Araki of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure fame. I know there's a Volume 2, and I don't know if that completes the series, but this is a really old manga, and this is actually flipped, as you can sort of see from pulling it out. These are very kind of tight in here. But what I'm really hoping is that maybe, unless Viz has lost the publishing rights to Bao, since JoJo's Bizarre Adventure has been getting a lot of attention, it's very popular now, I'd like to see Viz maybe revisit some of Araki's older stuff that they published, and, you know, publish it as it was intended in, like, better, cleaner editions. That would be really, really neat. But until then, I'm probably just going to get Volume 2 of this edition and then dream on. Next we have Beasts of Abigail, Volumes 1 and 2, which is kind of like a fantasy shoujo about this race of, like, wolf people who are enslaved by humans, and this girl who becomes one of them by, like, complete happenstance, and her trying to blend in their society while she tries to figure out how to return to her life as a human. It's just it's kind of like a basic shoujo. It's got all your basic shoujo elements, but with, like, a fantasy twist. And you know why I got this? You know why I got this. It's because I'm a filthy furry, and these are wolf people. Yay! Animal people with animal ears and fluffy, fluffy animal tails. You know how it is. You know what gets me. Next up we have Beautiful People, which is another book by Mitsukazu Mihara. This is a standalone volume of short stories, and these are more based off of more fantasy-esque sort of thing. And what I really like is that this edition has, like, gold detailing. There's more on, like, the cover and stuff, but I wonder if you can see the glimmer. If I shine the light, maybe? No? But yeah, it's another really good Mitsukazu Mihara volume. What can I say? Next up we have Biomega, Volumes 1 through 5, and then down here we have Volume 6, which is complete. It's been a hot minute since I've read Biomega. I remember, like, around Volume 5 and Volume 6, the pacing gets really weird. But it's kind of in the same vein as Blam, where there's not a lot of dialogue, and just a lot of action, and a lot of moments where you just get to chew the scenery, which is something you can't really do in his other manga, Knights of Sidonia. There's a lot more dialogue, there's a lot more stuff going on that people have to explain to you. But Biomega kind of leaves you to just kind of look around a little more, which I said is a lot more like Blam. And it's an earlier work of his, and I recommend it. It's in the SIG editions, the really high quality SIG editions from Viz. Really, really good stuff. Next up we have Black God, Volumes 1 through 19, which is complete. This is a really interesting case because it is clearly made by Korean authors, and I know that there's a couple of manhwa out there that are really, really old that were published by these people, but this is actually a manga. It is not a manhwa, because manhwa are printed from left to right, and this is right to left, like a manga. And I don't know what, like, the story was behind, like, the actual, like, publication of this, but it was made in Korea by Korean authors, and it was sent overseas to Japan and was published in a Japanese magazine. And a really funny, like, story behind Black God is that, like, they were really excited because they got, like, a magazine with Black God in it, but they couldn't read the manga that they'd written and drawn because it was in Japanese. But yeah, Black God's a really interesting case, and I wonder if there's more manga out there like that, where it was made by Korean creators, but it was sent over to Japan and published in Japanese. And it's a really fun, just battle manga. A really, really neat sort of, like, fantasy sort of battle manga. And yeah, I bought it because I found the first 12 volumes in, like, a value pack for $40, which was really, really cool, and got me pretty much most of the series, so yeah. Alright, and then down here, next to Biomega, we have Blade of the Immortal Omnibuses 1 through 4. These are really nice omnibuses put out by Dark Horse. And as I know there are reasons why this manga was flipped, mostly due to the clothing that the main character wears, because he has a swastika on the back of his clothes, and every volume they have to let you know that it wasn't originally a Nazi thing. It was like, has some sort of like Buddhist influence actually, and it's actually about, like, I forget what it means per se, but it's not like actually a Nazi thing. And so every, like, beginning of every volume, it's like, hey guys, that's not a Nazi thing, and they have to explain it. But another thing that I went into this a really long time ago, and it was kind of looked over, because it sounded like I was just complaining that, oh, it's flipped. But the reason why I'm kind of bothered by the flippedness is that they used 2 different techniques when they were flipping this manga. And one of them was they took the individual panels and they, like, cut them and pasted them in a manner that would make sense reading it in a regular left-to-right format. But in other pages, they just straight up flipped these left-to-right pages around to fit a left-to-right format. So, like, you will have a panel, like I said, like, back when I was complaining about this, you'll have a panel where there's 2 characters on, like, say, a porch, and one of them's on one side of the porch, and another one's on another side of the porch. And you'll have, like, a page where they use the cut-and-paste technique, where it's one character on one side and another character on another side, and then you'll have a page where it's just straight up flipped around, and those characters will be on totally separate sides of the porch, and their clothes will be reversed, and it's very confusing, especially if you're paying attention, and you're like, hey, hold on, wait a second. But that's what bothers me about the reason why this is flipped. I'm not bothered by the fact that it's flipped in general, because I know there's a reason why. I just wish they'd stuck with one technique instead of, like, switching between the 2 randomly. Next we have Blam, volumes 1 through 6, and we also have the Tokyo Pop publication of Blam with volume, I don't know if you can see, there's volume 2 up here, 3, 4, 6, and 7, 8, and 10. Loved Blam so much I fucking bought it twice. And it's just, like, that OG Tsutomu Nihei stuff. The characters look really kind of weird. Their eyes are kind of really far apart, and the hair kind of on the dudes is just kind of like, it looks like how to draw manga hair, if you know what I'm talking about. But the details and the background and the scenery are what really, why Blam was published in these huge frickin' $30-something books, is just so you could appreciate the beautiful, beautiful scenery and artwork that are in here. And it is definitely something I recommend buying. Maybe not for cover price, but definitely look for sales, because this is over. This is done. And you might be starting to find a lot of these for sale, maybe, possibly in the future. So yeah, I definitely recommend buying these. Don't recommend buying them at cover price. Find them at discount or being sold by somebody on discount. I'm not saying it's not worth the money, but not everybody has $30-something, $35, $36 to drop on 6 books. It's just probably not happening financially for a lot of people. Next up, let me just move this light just a little bit. We have Bloom Into You, volumes 1 through 4. this is a Yuri that a lot of people like, and I can understand why, because it's, I think it's either the fact that the world kind of feels lived in, the author really focused on not just detailing the characters, but also detailing, like, the world that they interact in, I think, is one of the draws. Another one of the draws is that it's a really incredible slow burn, where the characters don't immediately fall in love. The senpai kind of, like, falls head over heels for the main character immediately, but the main character is more of an asexual protagonist, which is not something we see a lot of in Yuri, so I'm pretty sure that's the draw to Bloom into You. Next up we have Blood Alone, with the Omnibus with 1 through 3, and then 4, 5, and 6. This was dropped by Seven Seas. We haven't seen Volume 7 or mention of Blood Alone at all for years and years and years, and I think, I don't know why. I remember reading that there was, like, some legal trouble, but that was on the Japanese end, so I'm not 100% sure what's going on with Blood Alone, but I've just come to assume that it's been dropped, unfortunately, which is really sad, because it's a really neat vampire manga. They go into a lot of, like, vampire stuff that a lot of vampire manga doesn't really go into. They go into a lot of, like, actual, like, legitimate vampire lore, and there's a couple of, like, chapters in here, or I wonder if I can show this to you really, really quick, because I'm starting to run out of time, where they all just kind of forego the, you know how, like, things are, like, in panels, confined into panels. Sometimes they'll just forego the panels. I really hope I can find one. Come on, where are you? There's just times where the manga just kind of ditches panels altogether and just has all the characters and all, like, the scenes kind of floating in a void. Here we go, yeah, stuff like this. There's no panels, it's just them floating in a void, and you just kind of have to guess and check where everything is, but there's a flow. And it's just something really interesting that this manga does, and I'm probably not going to bother trying to put that back until the end of the video. Next up we have Children of the Whales, Volumes 1 through 2, which is kind of a new pickup. I've read Volume 1, but I haven't read Volume 2, and I've kind of heard people describe this as a shoujo, which is really interesting. Maybe I wasn't really... It seemed more like sort of like action-adventure-y sort of thing to me. Had really strong Ghibli vibes, though, I feel. But it's probably not as, like, action-adventure-y as, like, a shonen. But, yeah, I know Volume 3 is coming out soon, and I'm really, really excited. Maybe when Volume 3 comes out, I'll binge it again and just kind of reread it, maybe. And then finally on this shelf, we have Chobits, Book 1. Book 2 is on the next shelf. And this is another foreign one, but unlike Another, which had kind of the advantage of being published in a really, like, large, oversized volume that made it a little easier to read, Chobits is tiny as hell, and it makes it impossible to read, and as you can see, it's so creased, and it's hard to hold, and it's hard to read, and I'm all for, if it's in an omnibus, I'll pick up an omnibus. Like, if I have no other choice, I'll pick up an omnibus, but this is just... Like, Dark Horse just really wanted to put it out, and it's like, come on, you guys, this is almost impossible to read without destroying the book, because it's so small. It's just barely bigger than, like, the standard Seven Seas book sizes, which are actually considerably small. But, yeah, that's, like, my only, like, omnibus complaint, is when you've put too much in the book, and you didn't consider how difficult it would be to read. You just kind of get concerned about the binding and holding it. Like, I like the Death Note All-in-One edition because it is around the same size as this, but just the way it's been printed, it makes it a lot easier to read. I don't know, there's something about it that makes this hard to read, but the Death Note All-in-One edition is easy to read. Maybe because the pages are thinner and the spine's a little more flexible, but yeah, this is just, like, come on, Dark Horse, what the hell. But yeah, that's Chobits, Book 1, and Book 2 is on the next shelf, which will be shown in the next in-depth manga collection video. And until then, I will see you all next time. Goodbye.